Is there a driving factor? Are people just evil? Why is it that we're doing these kinds of things? There are many organizations out there that actually look into these kinds of solutions and they propose these problems and they propose their own solutions. But unlike other organizations, the Zeitgeist movement, at the Zeitgeist movement, we don't blame a politician like Stephen Harper, who's one of your best friends, but we don't blame him. We don't blame a corporation like Monsanto. They're not at fault. It's a larger picture, okay? We have to realize that politicians, corporations, and even ourselves as individuals, we all have the same underlying goal in our society, which is positively enforced as economic growth. In other words, you could say money. We are driven by money. And is it then wrong for a corporation to want more money each year? By the same rationale, would it be wrong for you to want a raise in your job next year? I mean, most people would say, I want a raise. Of course, I deserve it. Maybe the person at the top doesn't deserve it. But, I mean, wouldn't they say the same thing? Of course, I deserve to have more money. And so if our society positively enforces having more money, because we allow people that have more money to have access to higher quality goods and services, they have more prestige, we put these people on a pedestal and we look up to them, the business leaders in our society. Obviously people associate money with freedom in some way. And so the more money you have, the more free you are to do what it is you like to do, especially in your retirement. So, it's difficult to convince people to stop wanting more money, given the benefits and the positive reinforcement that they're in, right? So, when we come back to the idea of sustainability, we have to realize that it's simply economically irresponsible to build sustainable products. I mean, that's really where we've come to. If you think about an example, say a car company. Say a car company is actually able to build a car that can last 20 years with very little maintenance or repair. Say you were able to do that, okay? I mean, what would be the incentive for the company to make a car such as that? I mean, they would basically have very little repeat sales. Every 20 years you're coming back to buy another car. It's not a really good strategy for a business. They want to have more frequent. So right at the beginning you might have a lot of sales, but in 5 years nobody's buying your products anymore. Also, car companies are associated with parts manufacturers, service providers. They're not going to have a good time. These people are going to be standing around not doing very much because all the cars are running much better, much more efficiently, and needing less servicing to run. So, you're going to go broke. If you apply this kind of rationale to other industries and you see the same pattern, it's just not economic. It's not profitable to have sustainability in our economy today. So, we have to think about maybe a larger solution, which is what the Zeitgeist movement is trying to do. Fortunately, economic growth associated with these kinds of ideas is not what the mainstream media claims it to be. I mean, we hear a lot in the mainstream media about the economy having to grow, but in reality, the happiness of Western societies has not increased as the economic growth has. In fact, there's an inverse relationship, as in the more economic growth and wealth we have in our society, it seems like the unhappier we are as a society overall.
Because most people have great visions of what kind of transition should be taking place in the world, and I agree. But the practicality of getting it done is not so simple. And I hate to say it, but many who propose these radical changes, whose ideas are certainly valid, have forgotten to do it themselves, to realize the great difficulties they face in an ever-changing soup of solutions, with variations of money and time commitment. Ideas are great, but doing it is far more difficult, and you will discover that there are many answers to one problem, and your solutions will constantly be evolving. I have been trying to live sustainably in my own backyard, but the results I am coming up with are now quite different from my original ideas, and are continually evolving. In fact, I even question whether it is at all possible for most people. We are asking too much of a society, skill set to be sufficient. When green grass grow, does anyone know where I used to go along the Blue River? Will there ever be a rainbow? will the sun ever shine? What lies behind the earth and smog? A worthless, endless line.
Notice how she spells. Notice how she spells lies. I'm telling the truth.
I went to music school at the University of Toronto. Made harpsichords, worked with many famous artists, started purchasing buildings, owned a magazine for 20 years, wrote software for my internet CD and book sales, owned a small glider company, and finally settled in Port Burwell to be away from the rush of city life. I intended to sail a boat around the world, but that plan was aborted when an excellent south-facing home was offered to me, so I settled down to build my sustainable home. A windmill, solar cells, biodiesel, and solar hot water systems are only a small part of my thinking about our future, because one has to look deeper into the causes of our many problems, such as our economic system, which has a total disregard for the earth and the generations that could have followed us. We are at peak everything, and no amount of money nor technical wizardry will redirect this folly. It is up to the individuals to realize the dilemma we are in, and we must directly challenge the bureaucracies that force upon us laws that have little reason or sensibility to them. When I hear the reason why I cannot do anything is because it is against the law and there is no reasonable supporting arguments, I go on the offensive, and to this date in Bayonne, I have yet to lose a case. When I began this odyssey, I was more mechanical than thoughtful, so I made the first mistake that everybody makes. I looked at getting energy from the sun. What I should have done was to insulate my house and minimize my energy uses. We would rather buy our way out of a problem when the simplest solution has to do with just cutting down our usage. I sectioned off the house by putting doors in every room and concentrated on heating the room I use most. Worked like a charm. Solar cells, a garden, a compost pile, a methane digester, solar hot water heaters, your own water supply, your own composting toilet, and no job outside the home, because all of your time is going to be taken up with maintenance of the systems. Otherwise, you're just trying to sustain the unsustainable. We are in a transitional period, still wanting to maintain our unsustainable ways by using windmills, solar cells, etc. But it is important to look where we are headed, where we will end up, and without any question in my mind, it certainly does not allow the use of electricity and fossil fuels, except for the very rich. Renewables will not have enough energy output to replicate solar cells and windmills, let alone maintain our current industrial base. We need a drastic change in our lifestyle, not only for the health of the earth, but to avoid catastrophic food shortages and loss of our lives as we know it. The most difficult concept to understand is to live within our energy needs. When the sun does not shine and there is no wind, there is no electricity and no hot water. One would rather turn on the generator, but living within our energy needs makes you flexible by saving work for those days that does not use energy, or perhaps missing a shower. What I have done about 5 to 6 years ago was to move myself into the transitional stage, and within, say, 10 to 15 years, will enter the non-electrical, non-fossil fuel stage. So those who are just entering this transitional stage will be disillusioned, as all alternative energy at this point is solidly based on fossil fuels to get them built, is very expensive, and it will not support our current lifestyle. They will especially be concerned about sound, but forget about the noise from their own lawnmowers, cars, and motorcycles. Any windmill with less than a 12-foot diameter blade will have noise issues. Luckily for me, I have some experience with airfoils, and this has not been a problem so far. But even though traffic noise, lawn mowing, and kids playing creates far greater noise, your neighbors will complain about the hum at night, or the flash of the sunshine on the blades. But even the quietest blades can become noisy with the accumulation of bugs. And despite the neighbors' cars that kill myriads of bugs on an evening drive, they will complain about your bug slaughter. So every month you lower the windmill and clean off the bugs to reduce noise. Some of my neighbors like the fact that I have a windmill, but complainers usually get a lot more attention. As mentioned earlier, we have some imminent and serious problems to solve. And while there are many wondering how much their electricity is going to cost next year, I have gone the route of self-sufficiency, learning how to live within my energy needs, derived from the sun, and being part of a community that does not rely on fossil fuels. Until one council member suggested we have a temporary one-year permit. This gave me the chance to get started. I did realize that the Green Energy Act was coming up soon, so that might just save me from the tremendous expenses of trying to get a zoning change, which is what happened. But Bay and Council was the last to acknowledge this. On top of all that, the Electrical Safety Authority got wind of my windmill and proceeded to charge me with a $55,000 fine, $5,000 a day for non-compliance, and promised a holiday in jail for 1.5 years, all because I built it myself and it did not have a CSA sticker. I phoned the CSA, and they laughed at the thought that a 24-volt windmill was considered dangerous. But convincing the electrical safety of this was a very different matter. I was duly served a notice of an impending trial, and I decided I had finally had enough, and I would go to court and then to jail rather than take down the windmill. Electrical safety suddenly gave up and said they would come and inspect it. They walked around quickly, then said it was fine, but would not issue me with a letter saying it had been inspected. Meantime, the municipality of Bayham was still hounding me for a zoning change. The Green Energy Act passed, and after the Ontario government notified Bayham Municipality, I finally got notice that indeed they had no jurisdiction over the zoning if it was involved with renewable energy, so my windmill was now legal. The windmill developed ways to heat water with the sun, and even made my first solar air heater. That did not really do anything until I grasped the notion that I needed to use less energy. Nobody seems to consider where we are going to get our electricity from when the fossil fuels become too expensive, or the energy return on energy invested becomes less than the energy used to obtain that energy. The idea then came to me that just maybe we do not need electricity, just as cutting down on my energy usage was such an easy idea. The commonly held idea of charging batteries so you can come home and do the washing is absurd. You need to use the electricity as it is being made. Also note that the wind and solar are usually complementary. Where there is wind, there is no solar, and vice versa. So you need both. And they need maintenance. Batteries need filling and careful watching for the correct voltage. Windmills need to be supervised so they can be shut down in a strong wind.
Doesn't work. Okay. So, I'm talking about cities, or how to reprogram an urban system to avoid complete hardware failure. I come from a computer science background, and I'm interested in that actually in your software design. Perhaps it's something about computer-oriented people having an interest in overhauling entire systems at once. And that's really something that we have to do. Just to give you an idea of what kind of hardware stresses we're encountering right now. During the winter, this past winter, the largest human migration in history occurred. Does anybody know that? Hundreds of millions of people migrated from China's urban centers to the rural centers over a period of 1 month. That was just this past January. The second largest migration in human history was the same time the previous year. And the next largest migration in human history is going to be the same time next year. So seasonal migrants going from rural China to urban China are stressing the hardware that our system has to a breaking point. In fact, it's going to be at such a point that within the next decade, there are going to be more people migrating back and forth to China than the entire population in the United States. So that's an interesting number to think about. Speaking about the United States, about 80% of it right now is urban. By 2050, imagine the entire world being as urbanized as the United States. That's the reason that I'm talking about cities right now. Because cities are our future. They're the character that writes the human narrative that we have to deal with. about these 4 categories. I'm going to try to narrow it down. First, I'm going to talk about food, transportation, and energy, and then why cities in the first place. Why do we have them if they're such bad things? Maybe they're good things too, I don't know. This is Trent University. This is actually a colder climate than us. And this is a rooftop garden. So this is all on top of a building, on top of a university. And you get an idea of how lush it is, how much you can grow in a very small, concentrated space. Again, this is colder than what it is here. So imagine what we can grow right here in Toronto. And if you wanted to prolong the growing season, what happens when you put a greenhouse on it? This is sort of a test of principle. Just how much can you grow in an area with very little natural energy for many seasons of the year? But it's quite a lot. There's something else that's going on when it comes to all this urban growing. It's not just the sort of baseline ways of growing food, but the kind of communities that form around it. These are several social communities, sort of like social media, that involve local growing plants. And they allow you to connect with people with backyard space who don't have the time to culture it themselves. If you have some free time, you go in, you turn their backyard into a garden, and then you grow food there and you share it with them. If you have a garden or you have land space that you don't have time to garden yourself, you post it online, and somebody else comes and gardens it. If you don't have any land of your own, but you have the time and you want to be self-sustainable, you can look it up online to find out where land is available. These are social networks that are emerging worldwide. They're available here in Canada, but they're also occurring in Africa, where internet connection is much more limited. But it's much more prominent in the UK, in the US, and developed nations that are so urbanized that they just don't seem like they have anywhere to grow. But there are lots of places to grow, and social networking really opens up a lot of opportunity. So what it's done right now is it's in a petri dish, and it just located all the oat flakes. These oat flakes are positioned at the locations of major Spanish cities. And it has just emulated the highway design of Spain. What it's doing right now is, having colonized all the major cities, it is now making its network more efficient. It connects different nodes, and the ones that are not required for passing energy between different areas are reabsorbed and assimilated. So this is the end of the simulation. And we have just seen Iberia, so Spain, remade the mold. Does that mean that Spain's highway system is about as intelligent as a piece of slime mold? Well, let's look at it again. In Tokyo. And this is a time-lapse recording of a petri dish with oat flakes and the slime mold growing in it. I feel like this is where you need a music theme from the final countdown. I don't know how easy it is to see without light. Can you see it? I guess it's yellow. No, we can't see. Does that help? Okay, so what's just happened again is this slime mold has started off in that middle oat flake. That oat flake is Tokyo. And it has grown to cover all these other oat flakes, which are the positions of different cities in the greater Tokyo region. And it has just replicated the subway network of Tokyo. So all those lines connecting all those yellow dots there, those are the slime molds, that's the slime molds network, coming up with an energy-efficient way of connecting all these different food sources in an identical pattern to the way that we connect cities in Tokyo for the most energy-efficient transportation network. What does that mean? Well, that means we now have biological software for simulating the most efficient way of networking different locations. That means we can use slime mold and the built-in intelligence of its DNA to figure out what the most intelligent network is for connecting different transportation sites. That's kind of interesting. That means you have a software program built into genes for optimizing efficiency. What are some of the implications of that? Well, if you imagine the, kind of cliche image of construction workers where 4 people are standing around and 1 person's doing all the work, Now, none of them are going to be doing the work. If we reprogram that slime mold to say, after finding the most efficient network, calcifying and actually turning into the road itself. Imagine if you didn't have heavy machinery doing all this. You had a living organism that connects different locations and then turns into the road itself. That's kind of scary in the magnitude of difference it makes. And that is the kind of thing that might require some investment. But that is low investment compared to some of the other technologies we have available to us. And for that reason, transportation is a public utility. As the Transportation Ministry of Manchester is there to point out, they're there to work with us. You don't need to be an engineer to know what's going to happen when they put their gears into motion. We are running a train network. One of the most energy inefficient problems is the fact that the train has to stop. It has to stop every time passengers are going to get on and off. This one doesn't do that. This train never stops. It never loses momentum. You don't have to reinvest energy in stopping and starting it. And it's a lot faster than the TTC, I can tell you that. Something like this. If there's ever a problem at a subway station, the train can just go right through. It doesn't have to wait until the problem is resolved. That makes the TTC a bit more appealing. And it can be entirely automated. So now every TTC employee can sleep at the job. Congested traffic in the world. It's tied with Mexico City. So this one, I think in Beijing they're estimated to have 4 million cars on the street. Yeah, it's 4 million cars on the street by the end of the year. So that's more than the population of some countries. And in just a moment, we're going to see what one proposed solution is. This is Song Yuzhu from the Shenzhen Hashi design firm. And he's come up with a bus that straddles hybrid transportation. It straddles over cars. That's an interesting idea. Something like this is very appealing for people who don't want to build subway stations, who don't want to build tracks in the ground. That's very energy intensive. This one just goes on top of your current road system. It's got a couple options for how you power it. You can build rail tracks along the side of the road. That's pretty energy efficient in the long term, but if you don't even have the wealth to do that right off the top, you can paint lines on the side of the road, and using an infrared tracker, it will follow those lines. So you don't need any physical material on it. Its capacity is somewhere between 12 to 1,400 people. In a space that you might ordinarily only have a dozen people in personal cars. That's going to change things. Oh, and by the way, unlike buses, which require parking lots to sleep at night, this one can just go to sleep on the road. It's one way that we can hack the system. This is one way that you just take basic technologies, they're not completely rudimentary, but you just reconfigure them in such a way that unsustainable practices, like driving personal cars, is not going to last very long. And of course, you can integrate cycling and walking into that very easily in storefronts that are very porous and accessible. Okay, so let's talk about energy. I'm not going to talk about it too much. Matt was talking about that. I know Mike is probably going to have some wonderful things to say about energy, but there are some important things we can say about it in terms of the city. It's worth pointing out that if we are to meet our energy needs by the year 2050, we have to achieve two or three of the following. We have to build one dam every 3 months. We have to build one nuclear plant per week for the next 50 years. We have to build 1,200 wind turbines per week for the next 50 years. We have to build 250,000 solar panels per day, or we have to build 150 solar plants per day. So those are our energy options if we're going with renewable energy. These are according, by the way, to Ripu Mahatra. He's from the Stanford Research Institute with a PhD in chemistry, and he's co-authored the book, A Cubic Mile. So he sort of knows what he's talking about. The point is, if we are going to achieve our energy requirements, they're going to require a lot of infrastructure. That is assuming an energy efficiency improvement rate of 1% per year. If we increase that improvement rate to 3% per year, we will only need 2/3 of that. If we increase our energy efficiency improvement rate by more than that per year, then we're going to require substantially less than that. There are some things that we're doing to improve our energy. You may think of wind turbines as the traditional windmill type of thing, and that is an effective design. It is also, many of them at least, are a couple generations old. Current generation wind turbines include a vertical axis wind turbine. You can stack those on top of each other. You can put cages around them so that birds don't fly into them. They are unidirectional. It doesn't matter what direction the wind is coming from, they will generate energy. And you can put them on top of skyscrapers where it's very windy. Well, we've got a couple of those skyscrapers in Toronto, and we have a bunch of them around the lakeshore. The lakeshore between 1830 and 1860 was a windmill line because it's so windy there. You could build windmills and they'd be powered very effectively, and we could redo that with vertical axis wind turbines on top of all the skyscrapers. And we could put them elsewhere too. And it's just a very simple way of capturing more of the energy that is present in an urban system that we don't capture today. Urban systems do have energy flow, but the way we build them today, they have less energy flow than what they could have. On this bottom slide there, that's supposed to be representing Houston, which is almost completely paved over, and that pavement absorbs a ton of sunlight during the summer. And because it absorbs a ton of sunlight, there is less of a difference between the lake air and the city air, and there's not much airflow. So not only do you have less airflow, which means less potential for wind collection, but it also means all of your exhaust and pollution stays in the city. Well, if we begin implementing rooftop gardens, that's not going to be the case anymore. Or if you begin converting the pavement to something else, well, you're not going to have as much concentration of heat during the summer. Something that trees do, that parks do, is it neutralizes the energy potential of an area. So it's cooler during summer and warmer during the winter. Will efficiency drive us to uniformity? This is, by the way, a model from Jacques Bestow from the Venus Project of a circular city designed for maximizing efficiency. It's based on Buckard Fuller's geodesic dome. If you're familiar with playgrounds and those domes, just the most energy efficient way of building a structure. Well, if you consider that every city is different and that every city has different energy potential, then you're never going to have complete uniformity in a system that is designed to capture all the efficiency in an area. They're all going to be diverse, and they're all going to adapt to their individual circumstances, and you're going to have diversity wherever you are. So I've been unfair. I asked the question in more cities, but I haven't answered it yet. I've been pointing out all these problems, but I haven't justified if that's possible. Why we should have cities in the first place? Because we know approximately how many gas stations are going to be in a city depending upon its size. Based on the 0.85 to 1 ratio. That means it's a sublinear expansion. It becomes more efficient to have a larger city or a larger human settlement because it becomes more materially efficient. But, unlike in a biological system, there are other things that a city generates. These are the social economy things. These are the wealth, the aspects of wealth and of creativity and of knowledge generation. And these things increase superlinearly, which means if you double the size of the city, you are not going to double the creativity that comes out of it. You're going to more than double the creativity that comes out of it, and more than double the innovation that comes out of it. And in the words of Jeffrey West, a theoretical string physicist who is now working on scaling laws, if you double the size of the city, you are doubling wealth, patents, colleges, great people, all these good things, but you're also doubling pollution, sickness, waste, crime, all by the same amount. That's a really fascinating thing. And it doesn't matter what the city is. So, yes, the question, is Toronto a smaller Tokyo? Well, not quite. I'm going to skip over this answer, actually, because we are running out of time. But if you consider all the knowledge that you saw in that bus, that shuttle elevated bus that you saw, that is human ingenuity and innovation invested into a single item. That is an item that is invested with embedded knowledge. It is invested and imbued with innovation. You see that in the subway as well. You see that in the rooftop gardens. You see that in the design and architecture we have around the city. Robarts Library, a big concrete block, is embedded with different knowledge than St. Kitts Hospital, which is a large glass contemporary building. They're embedded with different knowledge, and different cities are embedded with different knowledge. And what sets some apart from others is that they are adaptive, and they assimilate all the best innovations. And when we have more cities, we have more innovation. We have more problems, we're able to solve those problems with the innovation that they generate. So that was the last point I said I'd bring up, but I want to leave on a bonus question. I'm just being provocative. I'm not giving an answer here, but I think it's important to be provocative. Is sustainability possible? Because if we keep in mind that our problems are solved through innovation, but the circumstances that lead to innovation are the same circumstances that lead to those problems in the first place, maybe we solve problems, but we also create new ones at the same time. So it's worth asking, is sustainability possible? Maybe. Maybe not. This is an awful slide because I have a cursor. But this is an exponential growth towards singularity. That is also the way we mathematically formalize collapse. Because if you don't have a system of limits to growth, then eventually you expand beyond the ability to control it, and you get a singularity and you collapse.
When Europeans came to North America, you could drop a basket over the side of a boat and pull up codfish. They were so dense in the water that they couldn't escape an open basket. And for 400 years, anybody could make a living fishing. It was the foundation of the maritime economy. Anybody could go out and catch enough fish to make the money that they needed to live. And if they were ambitious, if they fished a little more and got some more fish than covered their basic needs, they'd have some extra money. And if they invested that in their boat or their net, they'd catch more fish. And then they'd have more money. And if they invested that, they'd catch still more fish and have more money. And the more fish, more money, more fish, more money was a classic business success story. For 4 centuries. It just got better and better and better and better, and then it collapsed. And there's something about better and better and better that doesn't naturally lead to collapse. There's something important going on that wasn't being paid attention to. And that was the fish stock. And the reason that they weren't paying attention to the fish stock was that for 4 centuries, nobody could imagine that we would be dense, incredible volume of fish, let alone bring it to the status of endangered species. But because of the expansion of the number of people fishing, and particularly the expansion of the power of the tools that they were fishing with, we did that. And the key point is, the amount of fish we catch no longer depends on how much we invest in fishing. The amount of fish we catch depends on how many fish there are. That's a very different circumstance than anything that our ancestors had to deal with. And we have to learn to deal with that. We have to learn to pay attention to the resource supply rather than just the economic process of making money and investing in it. Because what we did with the fish, we're doing with the forests. And we're doing it with fossil fuels, and with fresh water, and with soil fertility, with the ability of the environment to absorb our waste. Every one of those situations is a wake-up call to the human family. They're all telling us the same thing. They're saying, we are now grown up. As a species, we're now grown up. We're no longer a young offender. We're fully responsible to the laws of nature, and we will be tried in the court of natural selection. There's only 2 laws in nature that we have to obey. One is the law of the minimum. How much resources do we need compared to what our planet offers? That's what the fish and the fossil fuels is about. The other is the law of tolerance. How much of our waste can we tolerate? How much can the environment that supports us tolerate? If you take fruit juice and you put yeast into it, it'll demonstrate the situation. The yeast will digest the sugar in the juice and produce alcohol as a byproduct. As time goes by, the volume of alcohol rises in the juice, and as it approaches 14%, yeast can't tolerate alcohol at 14%, it dies. So you'll never find a naturally occurring alcohol greater than 14%. Anything more potent has been distilled or refined in some way. So if the human family recognizes that these 2 laws of nature apply to us in the same way they apply to everything else that lives on this planet, and we resolve to build our societies to live within the law, then we can be on this planet for hundreds of millions of years. There's never been a creature anything nearly as extraordinary as human beings. We get a lot of bad press recently because of our adolescent angst as we try to pass from our childhood and adolescence as a species gives us certain capacities that most things don't have. We've got good sense. It's not the best in the natural world. An eagle flying a mile up in the sky can see a mouse in the grass. We can't do that with our eyes, but we've got telescopes that can do that. We have telescopes that can see to the edge of the universe. While that was being debated, industry was saying, no, this will make us non-competitive, we'll go bankrupt, and all the sort of complaints and arguments you might expect from a teenager asked to clean up his room. But the laws were passed. People were applied to the task, and they actually met the 50% reduction in 7 years, and went on to bring it down even further for the remaining 3 years. So we recognized the problem, we applied our intelligence to it, and came up with solutions. The problem with that example is even though we managed a 50% on average reduction per source, because the human project is continuously expanding, we have almost twice as many sources today as we did in 1980, and almost the same level of acid precipitation that we had then. So as long as the human project is continuously expanding, we can solve these problems, but they'll come back again and again until they vanquish us, or we recognize that we fill our planet and start seriously designing to live within those planetary limits. So why do we have to grow? If you listen to the media at all, you'll hear, we're growing by this much, we didn't grow, oh my goodness, people are, hard times are happening, we have a recession, and growth, like it's the focus of the entire system. But, well, it was brought to my attention in 1990, because we had a recession then. I've been writing about sustainability and social change for some time. And I know we have to stabilize, if not reduce, our impacts. And somebody explained to me the economic system gets sick if it's not expanding. And that the recession in 1990, it didn't shrink, it just didn't get bigger. 1990 was the same record volume that 1989 had been, but because it wasn't bigger, there was businesses going bankrupt, people losing their homes, losing their jobs. The hard times of a recession were happening at our peak productivity up to that point in history. So I saw that as a problem, and I thought I would try to understand it. Studied economics and ecological economics for about a decade, spent a bunch of time writing, and eventually integrated that information with the social change and sustainability information of the earlier work and came up with Life, Money, and Illusion, my current book. And there's a half a dozen different reasons that I came across for why the system has to grow, why the economic system has to grow. And most of them are looking at the same thing from different perspectives. But there's one which I identify as the growth hormone of the collective human organism. And it's easier to understand if I give you a little story first. The story's about 4 cowboys who've been out on the range all day under the hot sun. They're tired and thirsty. They want to go to the bar and drink beer and play cards before they go home. So they go to the bar, they order their beer, and they ask the bartender if they can borrow a deck of cards. And the bartender says, sure, I'll lend you a deck of cards, but I want collateral. I want your holster or saddle or something to make sure you'll give me back the cards. I'll give you each 13 cards, which is the deck divided by 4. And at the end of the night, I want you each to give me back 14 cards. 1 extra for interest. I can hear the mathematicians chuckling. There's something going on. Somebody's going to lose their saddle. What's that got to do with our economic system? This I'll point out is what Brian was saying about, we got to deal with the economic structure, the money system. The money that we buy and sell things with in our society is created when people borrow it. It's loaned into existence. Coins and bills are only 3 or 4% of the money supply. They're manufactured, spent into circulation, and we can make change. But the largest portion, most of our money, comes into existence when people borrow it. The way that works is if you've got a business plan, you need $100,000, you go to the bank, you show them the plan, it's brilliant. There's no question in the banker's mind. You're going to be able to pay the loan back and pay the interest. The banker doesn't go to the vault and get you $100,000 in depositor's money. He just writes you a line of credit. It might have ink molecules in it. Most likely it's just electrons on a hard drive. But you can start writing checks for materials, for rent, for labor, whatever you need to make your business go. You write the checks, the people who get them can deposit them or cash them and spend them on anything they want. That's where money